be led by Karen Mick.
It's a beautiful morning to enjoy the sun, the fresh air. This is really a treat. So let's take a deep breath and feel the breath deep in your stomach. Let yourself relax. Let your body just float. Smell the morning air. Very fresh today. A little chilly. Notice how your body feels. Is your mind wandering? Just let it wander. Let it wander out there somewhere. Now imagine you have your fairy godmother waving her magic wand over you and all around you. She is anointing you with the power to be your best, happiest, and healthiest self. She makes you feel good about you. Are you feeling happy with who you are? Now take another deep, deep breath. Let the breath out. Are you feeling good? Go out and feel good and be who you are meant to be today.
Our presenter today is Susan Weeks, whose topic, The Power of Forgiveness, is especially appropriate for starting off the new year. We've all had some life experiences that were not as we would have wished them to be. Through humor, philosophy, and science, Susan will explore how we might change our perspective on our past. So often we cling to repetitive and demeaning thoughts of comparison, judgment, blame, and shame. Yet we can make the choice at any time to let go of thinking that imprisons us. Susan believes we can create our reality through our own thinking, through forgiveness. Susan Weeks, a new presenter at Open Circle, has led a nomadic life, Mexico being the 8th country she's called home. Among her professions, she's been an administrative assistant, editor, international tour director, and spiritual leader. At present, she is a licensed Unity teacher, pursuing a PhD in spiritual studies. She is aware that any path we take to become better human beings leads to creating a better world. Let's welcome Susan Weeks.
This is perfect. Thanks. I am so thrilled to be here today. It is absolutely a joy. It's been 51 weeks since I've given a talk of any sort. So if I seem a little nervous, it's because of that 51 weeks. But I was a spiritual leader at a Unity community in Cape Cod. And I mentioned to someone today, I perversely checked the weather there today. Minus 11 Celsius. Hallelujah, I'm here. The power of forgiveness. I think too often we surrender our power as human beings to something out there. Whereas really, our strength, our potential, who we are, resides always within us. I think that all too often we give away our power without even realizing it. Do you know of all the species, mammals in particular, as human beings, we are the most dependent on someone outside ourselves for the longest period of time. It's about 7 years before we could possibly survive on our own. And in that 7 years, the basis of who we are to become is established. How many of you could say right now, I've had a perfect life in every way? My jobs were perfect. My children were perfect. I've never had any health challenges. Everything has gone beautifully. I've had the most wonderful bosses I could ever have had. Every single position I've ever held. I was always recognized for what I could offer. Yes? Always. Always. How many of you set New Year's resolutions every year? Could I see by show of hands? Just I'm curious. How many of you keep those resolutions? I'm going to invite you this morning, to begin a practice of forgiveness. If you don't already do it, then now is the time to start. Choose today to start changing your life. Start today making a choice to become everything that you were intended to begin to be. From the very beginning, from the onset. Now, some of you may have in your lifetime experienced extraordinary pain. There might have been abuse, physical abuse. As children, I know that this happens. I know that psychological damage can be done. The truth is that none of us is really perfect. None of us is fully whole. We are all, in one way or another, damaged. It will manifest differently, depending on who we are. But we tend to have wounds that we conceal. We begin to wrap ourselves in a cocoon. or actually I like a chrysalis better. But we do everything we can to protect ourselves. Sometimes we choose to hold on to those things that have hurt us so deeply. Sometimes we hold on to the anger, the resentment, even hatred. But when has holding a grudge, when has hatred ever accomplished anything? In the 20th century, Mahatma Gandhi said it. Martin Luther King said it. Nelson Mandela said it. The words were slightly different, but the idea is, has hatred ever conquered hatred? Or anger, or upset? Has it ever done anything positive? I ask you to take a look at that. In my lifetime, I was raised by a crazy woman. I truly was. She was certifiably nuts. She was in my 40s, no, 30s. She was diagnosed as a functioning paranoid schizophrenic. She was crazy. I didn't know it because it was my reality. She was functioning because she could hold a job, and she was brilliant. She was extremely good at what she did. But she was emotionally and psychologically completely unavailable to me. How bad was it when I was growing up and I was raised by her alone? I had lived in 33 places by the time I was 14. 33 places. Well, it means that I was extremely adaptable. I was like a chameleon. I could fit in anywhere. This is a good thing. The downside of it is I never learned how to establish relationships. I never learned how to deal with frustration and anger and upset because I simply avoided it. Just moved on out. I remember very much what I was like before I hit the age of 7. What happened after that? I don't know. Because I have chosen to forget it completely. What I do know is that at the age of 6, I was happy, I was spontaneous, I was outgoing, I was exuberant, I was excited. And by the age of 12, I was angry and sullen. Now, how do I know that? Because my daughter at the age of 2 happened to go to a nursery school that was run by people who had a summer camp when I was 6, that I also attended when I was 12. I had no recollection. I have a handful of memories in those 5 years, and my mother is conspicuously absent in all of them. So we handle things differently, but all of us, in one way or another, are damaged. If we hold on to negative thoughts about pain, or about the hurt we have, or an imagined slight, those negative thoughts only exacerbate the problem. They only make it worse. Did you know the human brain has approximately, give or take a few million, 87 billion neurons in it? And the strongest, our thought processes, are based on how we develop the neuron connections. We think we have magnificent thoughts. Do you realize that our thoughts are simply the result of biochemical and electrical charges? Drugs and electricity create our thoughts that we take so incredibly seriously. And oftentimes, if we have had a painful past, what will happen is that we think our thoughts, those constant thoughts, do you know how many thoughts we have every single day? Give or take a few thousand, we have 50 to 70,000 thoughts every single day. And most of it, by the time we're aged 30, is on an autopilot. We tend to keep thinking the same kinds of things all the time, which means that those neural associations that form our thoughts are extremely strong. If you can imagine, have any of you seen a picture of a neuron? Okay, so when a neuron in its infancy is like a little sapling, microscopic, but like a sapling. Give it nurture, give it attention, and it grows into this magnificent tree, or a gigantic oak tree. And it creates associations with a neighboring neuron, etc., etc., etc. So it's these synapses that we have, little space in between, we are constantly reinforcing. Now, if you have a sapling, and you decide that you are not going to take care of it anymore, what will happen to the sapling? It's going to die. The same things happen with our neurons. And it doesn't matter if it is a magnificent tree or not. If you don't feed it, if you don't nurture it, it will gradually wither and die. And you can create new associations. So rather than continuing having the thoughts that are negative, that are harmful, that are hurtful, you can redevelop new neurons. They did some research with birds. Well, birds in the wild, and the curiosity was, what is going to be the difference? How do the birds know where their stores of food are during the winter? So they had birds in the wild, and then they had a control group of birds where they simply fed them, made sure that the seed was always available to them. Then they examined the brains. The brains of the birds that were constantly fed were way underdeveloped. The birds that needed to remember where they had put their food, the neural associations were much more compact, much more fully developed. Out of the 87 billion neurons that we have in our brains, most of them are not developed. They're looking for a job. They're looking for something to do so that they can grow and they can flourish. So why not start building from today onward new associations? Have the thoughts that you want to have, that make you happy. Do you realize it takes more muscles to frown than to smile? What a concept! To hold on to anger and hatred is not only destructive to us mentally, emotionally, psychologically, but it's exhausting. And the more attention we pay to the things that trouble us, the heavier our burden comes in life. It's like putting another rock into a sack that we are dragging along. Another slight, another hurt, another thought about what in the past has bothered us, the sack becomes heavier. And those little rocks that we put in there and drag along don't get smaller as they would in nature over time, but they get bigger and heavier because we are giving them importance. What's in the past cannot be changed. How we think about it can be. And today is the day to start changing that. And as we begin to change, we contribute to those around us. Have you ever walked into a room with someone who was angry and upset? And what that energy does to other people? Well, why don't we go the other way? What is it like when someone light and bright enters a room? Doesn't it lift spirits? Doesn't it make it a warmer, more inviting place to be? I love the cliche. It's like drinking rat poison and hoping the rat will die. We want to get back at the people who may have harmed us, who may have hurt us. What happened in the past happened. That's it. We could think of our brains as a gigantic file cabinet. Are we going to forget everything negative that ever happened? No, we're not. We're just going to give it less importance. It'll come up every once in a while. We can acknowledge it and say, thank you for sharing. And put it back in the file cabinet, and the file cabinet becomes a little bit lighter. Don't give the power to something that doesn't serve you. Take the most you possibly can as far as the lesson to be learned. I strongly believe that there is a gift in every experience. What do we learn? We learn perhaps something about someone else. More importantly, we learn about ourselves. And then from that, perhaps it's simply not giving the importance something should have. But we begin to establish our own values, our own set of values, not in reaction to something else outside of us. What can we control in our lives? How many of you have tried to control someone else? How's it work for you? It doesn't work too well. Inevitably, it's going to come back at you. What we can control is ourselves. We love not to take responsibility for something. Isn't it much easier to blame someone else for something than it is to say, I'm responsible for this? Yeah. Isn't it easier to say, she did it to me, he did it to me, than to ask yourself, what was my contribution to this? There are only two people that I know that everyone has heard the names of who taught self-responsibility. Responsibility for one's own self. One was Jesus, the other was Buddha. It's all about taking responsibility. We love to play the victim role, and as long as we're in the victim role, who's in power? If I'm a victim, am I powerful? I'm giving it all away. Nelson Mandela, when he was released from prison, said he realized that unless he learned how to forgive everyone who had put him in prison and kept him in prison for 26 years, unless he learned forgiveness, he would remain in the prison of his own making. Isn't that a statement? And in many ways, all of us are prisoners in a prison of our own making. It has nothing to do with someone outside us anymore. And as I creep up on, I love this, 3/4 of a century. I'll be 74 in March, and 74 is simply a number to me. 75 is simply a number. But when I say 3/4 of a century, oh my gosh. And I'm learning constantly. I continue to learn. And I'm open to learning. I'm open to being upset. I'm open to the messiness of perhaps I wasn't right. I'm open to the possibility that I'm not perfect. I get to learn. Just recently I learned that I don't handle anger well. I don't know how to deal with it constructively. I learned that there are some people who, to me, personally are toxic. And here I thought all my life that I could get along with everyone. I've just recently discovered that's not true. It's a delusion on my part, because I wanted to be perfect. And I'm not. I'm absolutely not. There is a fellow named Robert Drummond. He's a Unity minister and an author. He's written 4 books. And in one of the books I came across a phrase that I will never forget. He said, forgiveness is giving up any hope of having a better past.
Oh, wow.
A simple statement, but how profound. Forgiveness is giving up any hope of having had a better past. You can't change what was there. You can change your thinking about it. And you can start afresh with a new choice every single day. Now, for those of you who were abused or other horrific circumstances, I'm not saying that you should pretend it never happened. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. Don't stuff it away, cover it up. I have no idea what happened in the 5 years of my life, but I've managed to get by pretty darn well without dredging it up. I operate within normal parameters. Hallelujah for that, whatever that means. So don't stuff it in. Don't deny it happened. Let it air itself out. Don't give it the power it has over you. Be open and honest. And how many people have you heard about, or you may be one of these, who has made exceptional contributions to society as a result of something horrible that happened in your life? The one woman who comes to mind is the mother who lost her daughter to a drunk driver and began MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. But there are many examples. You can take the most adverse situation ever and make it a triumph, contributing to others, everything that you, every single one of you, is. Each one of you is magnificent. Each one of you has the ability to shine. Each one of you has the ability to be glorious, to contribute to others, simply by being exactly who you are. One of the ways of, excuse me, I've been dealing with this kind of rasping cough for a while. I understand it's going around right now. But you can choose at any moment to make a change for the better. There is nothing holding you back except who? We hold ourselves back. We are all powerful in our own way. And the moment you begin a regular practice of forgiveness, the more you'll let your own light shine. The more you'll be taking your power back. I spoke with someone this morning, just very briefly, who said she wakes up every morning with a practice of gratitude and goes to bed every night with a practice of forgiveness. You can, in all those moments, become more of who you are truly meant to be. If someone has harmed you, Thich Nhat Hanh, he's a Buddhist, Vietnamese Buddhist, and he says, if someone has hurt you, or someone does hurt you, remember that that person is suffering. And the suffering of that person is simply spilling over. So you can react, or you can simply respond. There is in this forgiveness practice, a couple of things. When we're angry, when we're upset, we get to blame. In the forgiveness practice, it doesn't mean that you have to spend time with that person again. It doesn't mean you have to like them. but you let go of the energy, the power that it has over you. There's one caveat to that when I say about spending time with someone. Who do you spend most of your time with? Yourself. So once we begin a practice of forgiving others, we also need to start forgiving ourselves. Forgiving others, we're taking the blame away from the other. Forgiving ourselves, I know I have done things that I'm ashamed of. I know that there are aspects of me that aren't particularly wonderful to view. I wish I could take back the words I've said to some people. I can't. So, in this practice of forgiveness, forgive others and also begin to forgive yourself. There is one, Gerald Jampolsky, some of you may have heard of him. He's a psychologist, quite well known in many areas. He has said that he has written quite a bit about forgiveness. And he said in the forgiveness, sometimes we need to alter our perception. He's also said sometimes we need to alter our misperceptions. Some of you may come from a large family where the siblings may not view an event of the past where everyone was present the same way. Yes? Well, this is what happened, and no, this is what happened, no, this is what really happened. And where's the truth? We don't know for sure. In our looking at our past, our perceptions may be slightly off. And does it matter? Does it really matter? It truly doesn't. My daughter is absolutely convinced that her biological father fought tooth and nail for 18 years for her to get custody of her. I have no idea where she came up with that idea. No clue whatsoever, but at 50, she is absolutely convinced. I separated from him when she was 3 months old. I took her back to see him when she was 9 months old, when she was 2, when she was 6. She is convinced that he's tried to get custody of her. I never even got child support, for heaven's sakes. That's how much it was. Where she came up with it, can I change her mind? Nope. I simply surrendered. Let her have that thought. There's nothing I can do about it. There is in forgiveness freedom. And I love the analogy of a butterfly. The butterfly starts as a little egg. It goes into the larva stage, the caterpillar. Yeah? It builds a hard protein casing around itself, the chrysalis, and eventually that development inside that chrysalis emerges as a magnificent butterfly. Think of yourself as a butterfly. Don't keep yourself wrapped up in the chrysalis or the cocoon that protects you. Be open to new experiences, to new adventures, to meeting new people. Be a butterfly. Take flight and be free. Martin Luther King also said that forgiveness was not an occasional action. It's a constant attitude. And it contributes to the healing of the word. Do you remember a fellow named Dag Hammarskjöld? Second Secretary General of the United Nations. And he said two things that I just find so apt for this situation. He said that forgiveness is the answer to a child's dream of the broken being mended and the soil being clean. broken being mended and the soil being clean. And he also said, it's been said a number of ways, but I like the way he said it a lot, a great deal. He said, to all the things that have gone before, thank you. To all the things that are to come, yes. Thank you.
If you'd like to order Susan's wonderful talk, you can really through our website's the best way, order directly, and Roy can bring it the next week. Now we'll take questions. Right, Susan? Yes. Yeah, of course.
If you have any questions, I have
Stipulated
answers.
questions, I'm quite sure. No?
Fabulous.
Oh,
Yes.
they're just thinking how to frame it. Let's see.
And I won't be offended. And I'm willing to be wrong.
Wait, now, let's see. They haven't turned this one on over there, I'm sorry. Next, we have two.
Hello?
What, David?
Is that coming through? A friend of mine once told me that when a man and woman get married, that the man wants the wife to always remain as she was before they got married, and the woman wants to change the man in many ways to improve him. Is there any truth in that?
It's an ugly rumor. Thank you for that, that's great.
Okay, there you are.
To me, it seems that giving forgiveness is, shall we say, a good response for confession. And we want to encourage confessions that people will make. And I'm thinking of the Catholic tradition that they get close to death, they send in a priest and he takes confession. Isn't that beneficial?
I think it can be. I think it can be. I look at things though, the toughest thing for me has been to look myself in the mirror and tell myself in the mirror things. That for me has been very, very healing. I have been personally reluctant to reveal to someone else some of the things that I've done that I'm not proud of. Would I do them again? No, I wouldn't. I would prefer to be an open book. But it has been extremely difficult for me to face myself and to be honest with myself. Now, there are other ways of doing it. You could write it on a piece of paper. Yes, you could burn it. Yes, you could take a pillow and beat the heck out of it. I've done that. Sometimes the use of a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a counselor, a life coach, it's all good. It's all good. I think life is an individual journey, isn't it? It truly is, because we all have different filters, so it's a matter of whatever works for the individual that I encourage, whatever the individual thinks will be of benefit. But I wanted on that tree posted some of the things I've done. No.
I don't have a question, but I want to thank you for a wonderful and most inspiring dissertation.
Oh, thanks very much.
Thank you all also for coming, and I would like to know personally when you became this wonderful, forgiving person. Did it take a long time? And if you have any suggestions other than ones of writing something down and burning it, or some other techniques that might help us.
I went through a period of listening to the weepiest music I possibly could. I cried a lot. With my mother, I never hated her. I never hated her, but I certainly didn't like her in my adult years. I was a dutiful daughter, but I spent as little time with her as I possibly could. She did the best she could. That's all that matters. And in our lives, we do the best we possibly can. What more can we do? And we learn from there, hopefully. Yes.
As you were talking, I was thinking of my own spiritual journey, for what it is worth. I was reminded of the recovery program from alcoholism, for instance. And when I started on that road, my sponsors and the people around me who had more experience kept talking about something they called resentment. And I had no idea what that meant. And then it turned out that's what you talked about, that we mull over in our mind over and over and over and over again what somebody else did to us. And we wish we had said that or punched them in the nose or that, and it just carries on. And we keep drinking over it. And then finally, there comes, later on in the program, comes the step, the 8th and 9th, where we make a list of all the people we have harmed.
Yes.
And then we contact them in whichever form we can, mostly by writing them a letter. And my sponsor said, make sure you have it registered, double registered, so you know they get it. And in that letter, we asked not to ask them for forgiveness even. If they want to give it to us, fine. But if not, that's not our problem. Our part is simply to acknowledge the harm, the exact nature of the harm we have caused them. And that frees us then to go on further and keep going on with the work.
Yeah, and I think 12-step programs are terrific. I really do. Making amends, is it making amends?
Yeah, it's called making amends.
Yeah, yeah. It's acknowledging that we have harmed others.
Again, I want to say the same thing. This is just excellent. I began going to Al-Anon. I don't have enough.
The microphones are...
I'm sorry, I don't have, I went back to, I started Al-Anon, and there's a very dear woman here right now who's made a difference for helping me proceed. Because the very things that we go through, the ones who have alcohol addictions, who have addictions to anything, anytime we have addiction, it's only harming ourselves.
Exactly.
And that's why this is, I consider that to be one of the most important things I ever do every week here. Thank you.
I have to be honest about this. My go-to in times of extreme difficulty is alcohol. Absolutely, it's alcohol. Luckily, I'm aware of it. And I'm willing to acknowledge it, but gosh dang. Good for you.
Thank you. Do you think it's important to, as you're forgiving someone else,
Yes.
to tell them about the experience you had with that person, or does that really matter in your experience?
We, human beings, we have a desperate need to be right about something, to have a dialogue with someone else about something is going to get into that from and I'm willing to be wrong on this, is going to get into that. He said, she said, I'm right, you're wrong. I think the value of a 12-step program and in making amends is you're asking nothing of the other person. You're simply sharing your experience. And that's all we can do, because we never know what anyone else is feeling or thinking. We can project what we think they're thinking, but we never know for sure. You know? Does that make sense to you? Yeah.
But I was just thinking that.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just.
Speak it, we'll repeat it.
No, I was just thinking that you're having an experience with another person,
Yes.
and you're expressing your forgiveness, right? That's the main part of what you're doing. But as you're doing that, you may also want to share something what you felt as that happened.
Well, here's the challenge with that. Maybe the other person doesn't care. There's one of the phrases, one of the thoughts to put in your arsenal, and I love it, and it's hard for me. What other people think of me is none of my business. Oh.
I'd like to close with one question, and I think it embraces something that many people I've encountered have felt here. Many of us have family who don't want to speak to us. Well, it's not a comfortable thing as you get older and older, and there's been a misunderstanding maybe, who knows, but how do you get through to such people who has...
Okay, confession time. My daughter and I have had a very interesting kind of relationship. I just have one daughter. She has, what I have come to realize, this idea about her father adopting her or wanting to get custody came up. She ran into this difficulty last September. I hadn't seen her for a while, and she begged me to come and support her in this. It was not a good idea at all. In fact, she threw me against a wall. She held onto my wrist. She was furious with me out of nowhere. And I am very aware that in this lifetime, we probably won't be able to heal. Sometimes we simply have to surrender. We have to let go of the people that we love most. Sorry. We have to let go. So,
Thank you. That is an answer. That is a very helpful That will conclude our session today. Be sure you dispose properly of your cups. Hope to see you next year and take your conversations outside so that they can